Alright, time to make another Street Fighter 6 guide video. Although, now that I think about it, it's been quite some time since the last one. Let me check when that was. Hello everyone, it's Mir, and I know that it's been some time, but I figured that now that Sagat is out, and the Sagat army is back in force, it would be fun to talk about anti-airs again, as of course, he's very well known for his Tiger Uppercut, being a zoner and everything, but every character in the game has to anti-air at some point. We already have 2 videos about general anti-airs already, which I highly suggest you check out if you're more interested in the topic, but I wanted to structure this video in a different way. I want to look at common issues that people have when anti-airing, and I'm going to give you specific solutions for those problems, as opposed to more general tips. If you want to skip around to whichever topic interests you the most, you can use the chapters below the video. The first common issue that I want to address today is getting hit while doing your DP motion. Now, you'll know that a traditional Shoryuken motion is forward, down, down, forward, and then punch or kick. So in the case of Sagat, it's punch. That's how you get his Tiger Uppercut. And if you are crouching, for example, and an opponent jumps at you, you'll notice that when you do the DP motion, the forward will force your character to stand up, the forward input will. So doing this motion quickly, in some situations, especially when you're doing it quite late, can cause you to get hit because your character stands up and all of a sudden they're much larger than when they were crouching, and they end up getting hit in the face. As you can see on screen, I did the motion correctly, but I did it just a little bit too slowly and I got hit. So how do we get around this problem? What I will teach you today is the so-called crouching DP motion, which is an input that will let you, as you can imagine, do DPs while completely crouched without ever standing up. And the motion in this case is down, forward, down, down, forward, and then punch or kick. You can also start from other down directions if you want, or from standing. So like, for example, you can be down backing and then do down, forward, down, down, forward. You can also do down back, down forward, down back, down forward. That's the same. The important part is hitting down forward twice, and it looks something like this. As you saw, Sagat was crouching the whole time and never stood up, and the DP still came out. I'll show from down back. And this is really important because, as I said, it lets you do a DP while completely crouched. Your hurt box as a character never increases because you never stand up. And you can do DPs really late this way, so that you hit the opponent when they're closest to the ground. Another advantage of this technique is that no one can see you churn a DP, because you could be doing this the whole time and the character is just sitting there, and then when you feel like you need to let it rip, you can just hit the down forward and press. So this can be quite useful in a lot of different situations, and in general it's a good technique to know how to perform. The next common issue that I'm going to talk about that a lot of people have is how to deal with cross-up attacks. Now, cross-up attacks are peculiar because you have to block them the other way around as they go over your head, like that. And they come in at an awkward angle. A lot of your normal anti-airs might have some trouble hitting opponents at that range, because just the hitbox doesn't interact with the opponent going over your head. Maybe your normal DP, for example, if you don't do it correctly, might go the other way, something like that, which leaves you really vulnerable to a punish counter and a lot of damage. So how do we deal with this? The first option that I'm going to show is to do a jump back light attack. It can be light punch or light kick depending on the character, whichever hits the highest, because basically you want to hit the opponent in the air as you're jumping back, as you can see right there, and it's before the cross-up actually goes over your head. So you do have to react relatively quickly, and the jump itself is not invulnerable. But what this achieves, as you saw on screen, is that first of all it maintains a corner position, if an opponent is trying to jump over you, they won't be able to get on the other side. You'll maintain the side, and this is obviously notable if someone is trying to escape the corner, as you can keep them in the corner like that. Also, it's a relatively foolproof way to deal with different types of jump angle and stuff, as the jump back basically puts you at the correct range where your air-to-air was going to connect. The obvious disadvantage, of course, is that the damage is really low, which is why many characters have usually better options for air-to-airs that tend to be slightly slower, but might have better rewards. So in the case of Sagat, he has a jump back medium punch. The medium punch is slower than the light punch, so it's going to be a little bit harder to use, but as you saw, the damage is higher. It causes a knockdown, which basically gives you more advantage in case you land it. With a jump back light punch, you just get an air reset, so basically you're even with your opponent in neutral. It might not be that beneficial, but the jump back medium punch at least gives you that knockdown. Another great option to use if your character has one is an air throw. You can do these from a jump back, so in very much the same vein as jump back light, you can do that and hit the opponent out of the air. The reward is much higher, and they actually give you a little bit of pressure often when you score the knockdown. Maybe you can get some type of Oki. Obviously, it's very valuable in the corner for the same reason as I mentioned before, because it maintains the corner position, and like I said, maybe you can even get some pressure. So this is a great option to keep in mind, again, if your character has one. Now you'll notice that some characters that have an air throw, like for example JP, have an air throw that switches sides. Now this is obviously undesirable if your opponent is cornered, because, well, it puts them out of the corner, while it's much more valuable if you're cornered and then it puts them in. But if you want to air throw someone that is trying to jump out of the corner, you still have the opportunity to do it while maintaining corner position. The way it's going to work basically is that you're going to be approaching your opponent, and the opponent is going to try to jump over you to escape the corner. We're going to jump after them once they're above our heads and air throw them, which will give us an air throw on the other side, and it looks a little bit like this. Again, this is not necessarily easy, but it is an option, and it's worth keeping in mind, as it could be particularly useful if you're approaching to maybe apply some pressure by pressing normals and whatnot, and you react to your opponent jumping over your head. The third option I'm going to talk about today is for characters with a traditional DP, so forward, down, forward, and then punch, like Akuma. And it's a very famous one. It's the Crosscut DP. And what this technique lets you do is it autocorrects your DP so that it comes out on the right side when the opponent is going over your head, and lets you hit the opponent as they cross you up. Now, you'll notice that this option doesn't maintain the corner, but it still is quite valuable because you get the knockdown and the damage from the DP, and in some cases you can get some pressure here. So basically it's some insurance in case someone jumps over you, and mid-screen, of course, this is much less of a problem. So it's still really important to know. How do you do it then? So the first input is forward, which obviously is the first part of the DP motion, and then as the opponent is crossing you over and jumping over your head, you press down, down back, and then punch and kick. And the way the input reader sees this is because the opponent is, again, jumping over your head, it reverses sides and it reads like a normal DP motion, like forward, down, down, forward, because the down forward is basically the old down back, right? So it looks something like this. And as you can see, you can do it while you're moving, which is quite convenient, especially if you're approaching your opponent. It might even make it so that some cross-up attacks are going to whiff. And in general, this is the most common way this technique is executed. You might have noticed that another way to do this input is by doing forward, half circle back, punch, or kick, which is very much in the same vein as doing forward, quarter circle forward to get a DP, except you're also accounting for the opponent jumping over your head. This might be more convenient if you, for example, don't find the other motion nearly as intuitive, or you just prefer to get a bigger motion to make sure that, you know, the move is coming out. But this has some risks. If you don't do it correctly, you might get a fireball on the other side, so you always have to make sure that you end a down back so that you get your DP. Sometimes you can get supers, so ideally you want to do it the correct way, but this is an option nonetheless. The second technique I'm going to talk about is the so-called wiggle motion, and it requires the knowledge of that crouching DP shortcut from before. As you can imagine by the name, we're gonna be crouching and we're gonna be wiggling down, back, and down, forward. And then when the opponent's about to cross us up, or rather after they cross us up, we're gonna press punch or kick, depending on the character, to get our DP. And it will always come out on the correct side as long as the timing is right, because you don't actually have to know if your opponent is in front or in the back here. You're just doing the motion really fast and then pressing and letting the game basically decide where the DP has to come out. So if I sit here, for example, and wiggle and then press down, forward, and punch, you'll see that that came on the front. But that one was in the back, and the motion still ended into a down forward, even though the opponent was on the other side. And the reason why that works is because we're doing the motion so quickly, and there's a certain amount of leniency in the game to recognize special move inputs, that then that is accepted as a correct motion, but because the opponent's over our head, the game decided that, you know, the DP has to come out the other side. The last crosscut method I'm going to show today is the delay method, and what this consists of is basically just doing the DP motion normally, really quickly, as the opponent is still in front of you, and then delaying the button press when the opponent crosses you up. Again, the game recognizes that the opponent's on the other side and the DP comes out the correct way. But the advantage of this technique is that because you're doing the DP motion, there's no risk for accidental supers, accidental fireballs, whatever. You're always gonna get a DP. The difficult part is that you have to do the motion quickly because we're using the input leniency system in the game to basically extend the window in which, you know, the special move is recognized. So you have to be pretty precise. If you look at the input on screen, it's a pretty clean DP, more or less anyway. But that's all on the player one side. But I pressed the punch late and the DP came out the other way and hit Ryu. This delay method is also how you cross-cut with charge moves as well. Now obviously you're not doing any different input, especially for down-up charge moves like flash kicks, like for example DJ. You're just doing down-up and then delaying the kick as much as possible when the opponent's on the other side to get an autocorrect flash kick. So again, something like this would give you an autocorrect flash kick, and you don't have to know if the opponent's in the front or in the back because the game decides for you as long as the timing is correct. It actually is possible to do this with back-forward moves, like for example Honda's headbutt. You have to be more precise because there's less leniency in how long the game maintains charge for back-forward moves. It's less than down-up moves. Another common issue is accidentally getting a super instead of a DP. And Sagat unfortunately suffers from this because there's a little bit of input overlap. The DP motion forward, down, down, forward, and punch is unfortunately a part of double Kuroseko forward, which is the motion for a super, and it also happens that it is with punches. So how do we prevent this from happening? The most important thing to keep in mind here to prevent a super from ever coming out is to end your motion in down forward, as the input reader reads that as a DP. So if you're doing a lot of Kuroseko forwards, as long as you end in down forward, you should always be getting a DP. Another way to completely prevent Kuroseko forwards from even happening is to do that crouching DP motion from before. Since we're crouching the whole time, we're never actually completing a full Kuroseko forward, and as such, you're not getting a super at all, no matter how much you wiggle here. Another issue that a lot of people have with Street Fighter in general is that they complain that their anti-airs do very poor damage, especially compared to how much damage they could risk taking if they fail anti-airing. They get hit by a jump in, the opponent spends all their resources, and you get blown up. So how do we improve this situation? As we know, normal anti-airs tend to do the least amount of damage out of all your options. For example, Chun-Li's standing medium kick here only does 600, but very often characters have access to slower and more rewarding anti-airs. So in the case of Chun-Li, it's their standing heavy kick. Not only does it do 1080 damage, but it also knocks down. And in many cases, you have an opportunity to follow up here for even more damage. Chun-Li, for example, can cancel her standing heavy kick into her unique Serenity stream, which is her stance, and in this situation you can actually get a full combo here and even extend with drive rush or supers for more damage. So all of a sudden the risk reward of the jump in is much more balanced between the two characters. Another way of getting more out of your anti-airs is to use them out of a drive rush, as they get unique properties. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that you should be anti-airing by doing your own drive rush on reaction and then pressing your anti-air button. This is the sort of thing that happens if, for example, you're doing something else. You're throwing a fireball and you're trying to follow with a drive rush, for example. That's a very common situation. And you happen to see that the opponent is, jumping over the fireball, and then you can hit them with the anti-air. A lot of normal anti-airs caused what's called an air reset, or air flip out if you want, which is basically a state where after you're hit in the air, you are completely invulnerable until you land. But you'll notice that if I do it out of a drive rush, all of a sudden the opponent is knocked down, just like her standing heavy kick, for example. And you can follow up here with anything that you want. This is what's so-called a free juggle state. Since, like I said, it's a free juggle state, you can really do anything here. You can go into a special move, you can go into a super, you can go into normals, like for example, you can go into a sweep. So it really opens up a whole branch of anti-air conversions that you can use here and potentially score really big damage. We can even put it together with what we learned before with juggle anti-airs to do some, pretty interesting combos. Of course, another way of getting extra damage from your anti-airs is that instead of using your normal anti-air, you can see here Elena's crouching heavy punch unfortunately does really pitiful damage because only one of the hits connects, is to use your special move anti-air. Her DPs do pretty good damage, especially the heavy one, which has extra range and a little bit of extra startup. It does 1500. Now, the disadvantage here is that you have to do a complicated motion. Instead of doing crouching heavy punch, you have to do the full DP motion to get the DP out, but you also have the extra safety of being completely air invulnerable, which means that you can do them actually quite late and still get the anti-air just fine. If you want to score some extra damage, you can use, instead of the normal version of your anti-air, which in the case of Ryu does 1680, you could be using the OD version, which does a little bit extra. And in some cases, again, like Ryu, you can even cancel your anti-air into a level 3 super. And if you do it correctly, you can score some pretty big damage this way. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. If you are particularly ready for the opponent to jump in on you instead of doing a grounded anti-air, like for example a DP, you can meet them in the air, especially if you have unique options like Elena here. She has an air target combo, jumping medium punch, heavy punch. You'll see that the damage is quite nice, but on top of that, she can even get follow-ups here if you are doing it correctly. You can get a DP, for example. You can get a super even if you have enough resources, and the damage is really quite nice. It could be a difference between just another anti-air and actually closing out the round. Lastly, another way of getting extra damage from your anti-airs is of course using supers. Some of them are specifically designed to anti-air, like for example Elena here doesn't have any grounded invulnerability but has full air invulnerability, so you can use it like that and you get some pretty nice damage. There's other characters like Ryu. His level 3, for example, is really fast. It's 5 frames, it goes up. It's basically a slight DP, except it does massive damage. But there's some other cases where even without invulnerability, you can still use them to great effect. Guile is a pretty good example here, as he has a level 1 that looks like this. It does have some invulnerability, so you could be using that for anti-airs, but it is a little sketchy. You have to do it quite late. But he has a heavy version that goes up in the air like this, and even though it doesn't have any invulnerability, if you use it correctly for anti-airing, you actually get some nice follow-ups here and pretty good damage. On top of that, any character that has an install super, in the case of Guile it's his double crucible back punch, can use that to freeze the screen and decide which anti-air they could use in that specific situation, as they get some extra time to think about it. And specifically for Guile, you even get time to charge your flash kicks during the super freeze, so it's particularly useful. Well, let's just say I'm walking towards Ryu and happen to do a level 2 at the same time. I can just get my flash kick, which normally I wouldn't be able to do, which can be the difference between just eating a jump in and getting a successful anti-air. And this was the last tip for today. I hope that what you found in this video was useful to you, at least some of it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. We always try to read every comment under our videos. If you have suggestions or topics that you'd like to request for a future video, of course, leave those in the comments below as well. If you enjoy our content, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. There's always more coming out, and I guess I'll see you all next time. Bye bye!